I died on a Tuesday. The knowledge came back to me all at once, not gradually, not gently, but like a tidal wave crashing through the walls of my skull. I gasped awake in our bed, the silk sheets tangled around my legs, sunlight streaming through curtains I'd chosen 3 years ago. My hands flew to my chest, searching for the wound that should have been there. The pills, the empty bottle, the note I'd left that he never read because he was too busy with her. But there was no wound, only my racing heart and the date glowing on my phone screen. June 14th. Our anniversary. The last day I'd been truly alive, before everything unraveled, before I discovered the truth, before the year-long descent into invisibility that ended with me swallowing my own erasure in pharmaceutical form. I was back. The bathroom light was on. I could hear water running, Jacob humming something mindless while he shaved. The same morning, the same oblivious performance of a husband who had already chosen someone else but hadn't bothered to tell his wife yet. This time I knew everything, every lie, every secret meeting, every dollar he would siphon, every colleague he would turn against me. Every night he would come home smelling like her perfume, while I slowly vanished into the background of my own life. I knew how this ended, with me hollow and worthless in his eyes, discarded like a draft he'd decided not to send. But that was the old ending. I stood up, legs steady, heart crystallizing into something harder than diamond. The trembling stopped. The tears I'd cried for months in that other timeline dried up before they could form. I would not beg this time. I would not cling. I would not slowly fade while watching him build a life with another woman using the fortune I'd earned. I would simply disappear. And when he finally noticed, it would be far too late. The face in the mirror was mine, but younger, no hollows under the eyes, no grey threading through my dark hair, no thinness that came from forgetting to eat because grief was more filling than food. This was me at 32, still whole, still powerful, still unaware of what was coming. Except I was aware now. My hands gripped the marble countertop. The cold stone anchored me. In the other room, Jacob's phone buzzed, once, twice, 3 times. I knew without looking who it was. Diana, his executive assistant, the woman who would become his everything while I became nothing. The water shut off. "Amelia, you awake, baby?" Baby. The endearment felt like acid on my skin. I closed my eyes and breathed through the collision of past and present. My body remembered loving him, the 8 years of marriage, the foundation we'd supposedly built together. But my soul remembered the truth. That foundation was mine alone, and he'd been planning to demolish it the moment something shinier caught his eye. Pain tried to surface. I could feel it rising like bile, the old hurt that had consumed me before, the betrayal, the erasure, the slow realization that I'd built an empire while he'd taken credit, that I'd loved completely while he'd loved conditionally, that I'd been essential until I became inconvenient. But I was not that Amelia anymore. That Amelia had broken. This Amelia would break him. The metamorphosis was instant, cellular. Every molecule of weakness burned away, refined into purpose. My hands stopped shaking, my breath evened. When I opened my eyes, the woman looking back at me was a stranger, someone who had died and learned that mercy was a currency wasted on those who felt nothing. "I'm up," I called back, my voice steady. "Happy anniversary!" The words tasted like gasoline before a match. I had 16 hours before Jacob would meet Diana at the Carlisle Hotel. The same meeting that, in the original timeline, I hadn't discovered until 3 months later, when I'd found the receipt in his jacket pocket, and the world had tilted sideways. 16 hours to become a ghost. I dressed carefully, the navy blue dress he loved, the pearl earrings from our wedding, the perfume he'd once said reminded him of home. I needed him to suspect nothing. I needed to be the Amelia he expected, loving, devoted, ignorant, while I methodically erased myself from his world. At breakfast, I watched him scroll through messages while I sipped coffee I couldn't taste. Diana's name flashed on his screen twice. He angled the phone away with practiced ease. "Big day?" I asked, voice light. "Board meeting at 3? Probably running late tonight." The lie came smooth as silk. In the original timeline, I'd believed him. I'd kissed him goodbye and told him not to work too hard. Now I just smiled. "Of course, I have some errands anyway." His eyes barely left his phone. I was scenery to him already, familiar, forgettable there. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I moved. First stop. The safety deposit box he didn't know about. Inside were documents I'd kept separate. The original contracts for Meridian Holdings, the tech company I'd built from nothing, while Jacob had been networking his way through business school on my dime. Every patent was in my name, every trademark, every piece of intellectual property that he'd later claim as ours, while systematically pushing me out of my own company. I'd been so trusting, so stupid, believing that marriage meant partnership, that love meant loyalty. I gathered every document and drove to my lawyer's office. Richard Chen looked up from his desk, surprised. "Amelia, I thought your anniversary meeting was next week." "Next week, when Jacob and I were supposed to restructure Meridian Holdings' ownership, adding his name to everything, making him equal partner in what I'd built alone. The generosity that would have been my undoing. Change of plans," I said, placing the documents on his desk. "I need you to restructure everything. Today. Transfer all assets into a trust, the one we discussed setting up for future children." Richard's eyebrows rose. "That's sudden. I'm feeling motivated." I met his gaze steadily. "Use the offshore accounts we established for international expansion. Make me the sole trustee. Revoke any power of attorney Jacob might claim through marriage. And, Richard," I leaned forward, "make it airtight, retroactive, permanent." He studied me for a long moment. Richard was good at his job because he knew when not to ask questions. "This will take most of the day." "I have all day." While Richard worked, I made calls. First to the bank, activating codes that locked Jacob out of accounts he'd assumed were joint. They weren't. I'd opened them years before we married, but had been too generous, too trusting, adding his name to the cards without protecting the principal. That trust ended now. Second call, my accountant, initiating the transfer of funds Jacob had never tracked because he'd never believed I was smart enough to hide money. The beautiful irony was that I hadn't been hiding it. I'd been building safety nets for us, for the life I'd thought we were creating together. Emergency funds, investment accounts. The nest egg I'd planned to surprise him with when we finally had children. Now, those accounts would fund my disappearance. Third call, the real estate agent. The penthouse in Manhattan, I want it sold. Quietly, quickly. "But that's your—" "It's mine," I interrupted. "Purchased before marriage, title in my name alone. Sell it. Wire the proceeds to account number." I rattled off the numbers of an account Jacob had never seen, would never see. By noon, I'd dissolved 6 years of financial entanglement. By 2, I'd restructured my company completely, removing Jacob's name from every honorary position I'd given him, every board seat he'd occupied without earning it. At 3 o'clock, while Jacob sat in a fake board meeting that didn't exist, I signed the final papers that made me a ghost in my own life. Untraceable, unreachable, financially invisible. Richard handed me the last document. "Amelia, I have to ask—" "Don't." My voice was quiet, final. "Just promise me that when he comes looking, and he will come looking, you tell him nothing. Attorney-client privilege. He was never your client. I was—" Richard nodded slowly. "He'll fight this. Let him try." I stood, gathering my papers, my freedom, my future. By the time he realizes what's gone, I'll be too far away to catch. I was home by 6, dinner prepared, candles lit, playing the role one last time. Jacob arrived at 7:30, tie loosened, smelling like scotch and her perfume. Something expensive and cloying that I'd once assumed was from the office. Diana's signature scent, Chanel N Degree 5. The fragrance of other women everywhere. Sorry, I'm late. He kissed my cheek. Brief. Obligatory. Meeting ran over. Of course it did. I smiled and poured him wine I'd already poisoned with my contempt, though he'd never taste it. How was the board? Tedious, you know how it is. He didn't look at me, already pulling out his phone. I did know how it was. In the original timeline, I'd attended those board meetings, until Jacob had slowly convinced everyone that my presence was unnecessary, that he could represent both our interests, that I was too emotional for business discussions. I'd believed him, stepped back, let him erase me from my own company while I focused on supporting his career. The memory made my fingers tighten around my wine glass. I saw Richard Chen today, I said casually. Jacob's fingers paused on his phone, just for a second. Oh, what for? Legal paperwork, boring trust fund details. I took a sip of wine, watching him over the rim. You know how I like to keep things organised. He relaxed, tension draining from his shoulders. In his mind, I was still that Amelia, the one who managed household accounts and charity events while he handled real business. The idea that I could outmaneuver him hadn't even crossed his consciousness. It wouldn't. Not until it was too late. That's nice, baby. He turned back to his phone, already dismissing me. I might need to travel next week. Singapore, big deal closing. Singapore, I remembered this too. The trip he'd taken with Diana, charging it to our company card. 5 days at the Ritz-Carlton while I'd stayed home, believing his lies about investor meetings and market expansion. How long? I asked, though I already knew. 5 days, maybe 6. I nodded, said nothing. Let him think I was the same wife who would pack his bags and kiss him goodbye and never question where he really went or who he went with. His phone buzzed. Diana's name flashed. I could see it from across the table. He glanced at it, then at me, calculating whether I'd noticed. I kept my expression blank, pleasant, empty. I should take this, he said, standing. Work emergency. Of course, I smiled. I'll keep dinner warm. He walked onto the terrace, closing the door behind him. Through the glass, I watched him talk, his posture relaxed, a smile I hadn't seen in months spreading across his face. He laughed at something she said, running his hand through his hair the way he used to with me, back when I was new and interesting, instead of familiar and dispensable. The pain tried to surface again. I pushed it down, down, down into a place where it could transform into fuel. I pulled out my phone and opened the email Richard had sent an hour ago. Subject line: completed. Every asset transferred, every account locked, every legal tie severed. I was still married to Jacob on paper, but everything that mattered, money, property, business, power, was mine alone now. Protected in structures he couldn't touch, hidden in places he didn't know existed. When he came back inside, I was clearing plates, the picture of domestic contentment. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, just Diana needing approval on some contracts. Diana? Her name in his mouth felt like watching him drive a knife between my ribs in slow motion. She works so hard, I said sweetly. You're lucky to have her. Yeah, he smiled, oblivious. She's really dedicated. Dedicated. That was one word for it. I have a surprise for you, I said suddenly, moving towards him. For our anniversary. He looked uncomfortable. He'd forgotten to get me anything. I could see it in his face. In the original timeline, he'd panicked and bought expensive jewellery the next day. something generic and thoughtless that I'd worn while dying inside. You didn't have to. I wanted to. I placed my hands on his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Steady, untroubled, the heart of a man who slept soundly while destroying someone who loved him. I've been thinking about us, about our future. Yeah. He was barely listening, his attention already drifting back to his phone. I think we should spend some time apart. Not much. Just a little space for me to visit my mother. This was a lie. My mother had died 2 years ago. He'd skipped the funeral for a critical meeting that had actually been a weekend with Diana in the Hamptons. But Jacob had never paid enough attention to remember details like that. Sure, baby, whatever you need. Relief crossed his face. Space meant freedom for him. Freedom to be with her without even the minimal effort of hiding it. I might be gone a while, I continued. A month, maybe 2. She hasn't been well. Take all the time you need. He kissed my forehead, already mentally checking out. I'll hold down the fort. The fort. He meant my company, my home, my life. Everything he thought belonged to him simply because he'd signed a marriage certificate. Thank you for understanding, I whispered against his chest. Feeling nothing. That night, he fell asleep easily, one arm thrown over me in habitual possession. I lay awake in the darkness, listening to him breathe, counting down the hours until I vanished. This was the last time Jacob would touch me. Tomorrow I was to become a ghost, and his world would begin collapsing, one foundation stone at a time, every single one of them carved with my name. I left at dawn while Jacob was still sleeping off the wine I'd poured generously the night before. 1 suitcase, that's all I took. Clothes, documents, and the burner phone I'd purchased yesterday with cash. Everything else, the jewellery, the designer bags, the accumulated weight of 8 years, I left behind. They were artefacts of someone who no longer existed. The car I'd rented under my maiden name sat 3 blocks away. I walked there through the grey morning light, each step feeling like shedding skin. By the time Jacob woke up, I would be gone. Not dramatically, not with tears or accusations or a confrontation he could talk his way out of. Just gone. The beauty of my revenge was its simplicity. I wasn't destroying Jacob. I was simply removing myself and revealing in my absence that I had been the only thing holding his world together. From the car, I made the first call. Meridian Holdings, this is Jennifer. Jennifer, it's Amelia Thorne. I used my maiden name, the one that was still on all the legal documents that mattered. I'm calling to inform you that, effective immediately, I'm assuming direct control of the company. There will be a restructuring announcement by end of business today. Silence. Then, but Mr. Hartwell has no authority over Meridian Holdings. He never did. Check the corporate registration. I am the founder and sole owner. Jacob was listed as a consultant. That position is now terminated. I don't understand. You will. There's a board meeting at 9. I won't be attending in person, but my lawyer will be presenting documentation. Make sure everyone is there, especially Jacob. I hung up before she could respond. Second call, the bank. I need to report fraudulent activity on accounts ending in 7,834 and 9,201. The banker's voice went professional. What kind of activity, Miss Thorne? My husband has been accessing accounts without authorization. I need them frozen immediately and all cards in his name deactivated. He's not a joint owner. Check the original account agreements. 1 moment, please. I waited, watching the city wake up around me. People heading to jobs, to lives, to routines they believed were permanent. I'd been one of them once, secure in the delusion that tomorrow would look like today. Miss Thorne, you're correct. The accounts are registered solely in your name. Your husband was added as an authorized user, but That authorization is revoked. Freeze everything. I'll be in later this week to restructure completely. Done. Is there anything else? Yes. The safe deposit box. No one accesses it except me. Retina, scan, and password only. Understood. Third call, Dr. Patricia Morrison, my therapist. Except I had never actually been to therapy. This was the therapist Jacob had been paying for Diana to see, using our joint credit card, thinking I wouldn't notice a $300 weekly charge labelled as medical consultation. I'd noticed everything. I just pretended not to. Dr. Morrison's office. This is Amelia Hartwell. I'm calling to inform you that any charges to my credit card for patient Diana Reeves are fraudulent. I'm disputing all past charges and preventing any future ones. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm not sure I can discuss. You don't need to discuss anything. Just stop billing me for my husband's mistress's therapy sessions. I think that's reasonable. I hung up and immediately called the credit card company, disputing 6 months of charges. They would investigate. Jacob would have to explain. Diana would have to find a new therapist or a new benefactor. By 9 a.m., I was 300 miles away, checked into a hotel under my maiden name, watching my phone light up with ignored calls. Jacob, 12 calls. Richard Chen, 3 calls. Jennifer from Meridian, 7 calls. I answered none of them. Instead, I opened my laptop and accessed the security feeds I'd installed in our home 6 months ago, the ones Jacob didn't know about, hidden in smoke detectors and picture frames. In the original timeline, I had installed them out of paranoia, trying to prove to myself that I was wrong, that he wasn't cheating, that my marriage wasn't a lie. They'd proven me right instead. Now, I watched Jacob wake up, reach for me, find empty space. Confusion crossed his face. He called my name, checked the bathroom, the closet. Then he saw the note I'd left on my pillow. Just 3 words. I'm visiting mother. He relaxed, picked up his phone, probably texting Diana that he had the house to himself. He had no idea yet. At 9:15, his phone rang. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I watched his face change. Confusion to concern to anger to panic. He was standing now, pacing, one hand in his hair. The call ended. He immediately dialed another number. My phone buzzed. Jacob calling. I watched him through the camera, watched him wait for me to answer, watched him throw his phone when I didn't. At 9:47, Richard Chen called him. I watched Jacob answer, watched him listen, watched his face go white. He was learning that Meridian Holdings was mine alone, that his name had been ceremonial, that every position he'd held was because I'd given it to him, and I'd just taken it all back. He sat down heavily on our bed. My bed, his hands shaking. At 10:03, he tried to access our bank accounts. Frozen. 10:15, his credit cards declined. 10:30, he called his lawyer. By noon, he knew most of it. Not everything, I'd been too careful for that. But enough to understand that something catastrophic had happened, and that I was somehow responsible. He called me 37 times that day. I answered none of them. Instead, I opened a new email account and sent a single message to the Meridian Holdings board. Dear board members, effective immediately, I am resuming active leadership of Meridian Holdings. As founder and sole legal owner, I'm instituting the following changes. 1. Jacob Hartwell is removed from all positions, effective immediately. 2. All contracts bearing his signature without my co-signature are void. 3. A full audit will be conducted on all company expenses from the past 3 years. 4. Any board member who wishes to contest this restructuring may submit their resignation. I will be in contact regarding transition procedures. Amelia Thorne, founder and CEO, Meridian Holdings. I sent it at 2:47 p.m. By 3 o'clock, my phone had 62 missed calls. I turned it off and went for a walk. The air tasted like freedom. That night, I stood in a hotel room 4 states away and burned every photograph. I'd taken them from the house the morning I left, not for sentiment, but for closure. Every image of us together, every frozen moment of the life I thought we were building, our wedding day, vacations in Italy, Christmas mornings, the candid shots of him looking at me like I mattered. All lies, I knew now, or if not lies, then temporary truths that expired the moment something better came along. I watched them curl and blacken in the hotel room's metal trash can, fire alarm disabled, window open, smoke drifting into the night sky, like prayers going nowhere. Our wedding photo went last, me in white, him in black, both of us smiling like we'd won something. I'd been so happy that day, so certain I'd found someone who saw me, valued me, chose me. I'd been so wrong. The flames ate through the image slowly, his face disappearing first, then mine, then the church altar, then everything reduced to ash. When it was done, I flushed the ashes down the toilet and watched them spiral away. Then I cut my hair. Not dramatically, I wasn't in a movie, but I stood in the bathroom and trimmed 6 inches off, until the woman looking back at me was someone Jacob wouldn't immediately recognise on the street. I'd always worn it long because he liked it that way. Now it brushed my shoulders. Lighter, easier. Mine. I took off my wedding ring, the platinum band with the inscription Forever J, that now felt like a joke, and dropped it in the trash on top of the ashes. Forever had lasted 8 years and ended the moment I chose to end it. In my suitcase was everything that mattered. Documents proving my identity, my ownership, my independence. The burner phone with numbers Jacob didn't have. Cash I'd withdrawn over 6 months in small increments that never triggered alerts. Credit cards in my maiden name attached to accounts he'd never known existed. I'd been preparing for this disappearance without knowing I was preparing for it, squirreling away security, building escape routes, protecting myself instinctively, even when I'd consciously believed everything was fine. Some part of me had always known that I'd need to run. Now I was running towards something instead of away from it. I took out the second phone, the one connected to the security cameras, the one that let me watch Jacob's world crumble in real time. He was still in our house, sitting in the dark, surrounded by belongings that meant nothing, because the person who'd made them meaningful was gone. His phone was pressed to his ear, probably leaving me another voicemail I'd never listened to. On the coffee table in front of him, legal documents Richard had messengered over, the corporate structure of Meridian Holdings, the account statements showing 0 balances, the restraining order preventing him from accessing any company resources, the evidence of his irrelevance. I watched him stand, pace to the window, stare out at nothing. What was he thinking? Was he understanding yet? That every comfort he'd enjoyed had been built by me, funded by me, made possible by my work while he'd coasted on charm and connections? That the life he'd taken for granted had been a gift he'd carelessly discarded? Or was he still in denial, still believing he could fix this, still underestimating the woman he'd married? My phone buzzed. The burner, the number only Richard had. They're asking questions. Jacob hired a private investigator. How long do you want me to stonewall? I typed back. Forever. He has no legal right to anything. Let him search. He's threatening to file a missing persons report. I smiled at my reflection in the darkened window. Tell him to try. I'm not missing. I'm just done being found. I turned off the phone and lay down on the hotel bed. Generic, anonymous, temporary. This was my life now. Rootless, untethered, free. I'd been Amelia Hartwell, devoted wife, invisible partner, professional ghost. Now I was Amelia Thorne again, the woman who'd built something from nothing before Jacob had convinced her to share it. And Amelia Thorne wasn't coming back. She was moving forward into a future where the only person who could erase her was herself. And this time, she chose to exist. Loudly, completely, on her own terms. I closed my eyes and slept without dreaming. 3 weeks passed like a slow-motion avalanche. I watched it all from my rotating series of anonymous hotels, tracking Jacob's disintegration through security cameras, email alerts, and the occasional check-in from Richard. The first crack appeared on day 4. Meridian Holdings board voted unanimously to support my leadership restructuring. Not out of loyalty to me. Most of them barely knew who I was, since Jacob had systematically kept me away from company meetings. But because the legal documentation was airtight and fighting it would have cost them millions. Jacob tried anyway, filed an injunction, claimed I'd stolen marital assets. The judge took 15 minutes to dismiss it. Meridian had never been marital property. I'd founded it 2 years before our wedding and never, despite Jacob's assumptions, added his name to anything that mattered. The second crack, the audit. It took the forensic accountants 9 days to trace what Jacob had been doing, slowly siphoning company funds into accounts he'd opened in both our names, accounts I had known nothing about. 50,000 here, 70,000 there, small enough to hide in quarterly reports, but adding up to $1.2 million over 3 years. Embezzlement. From his own wife's company. The accountants filed their report. I forwarded it to the district attorney with a note. I'm pressing charges. Jacob's lawyer called Richard within an hour, offering to settle this privately. Richard's response, per my instructions, Miss Thorne doesn't settle with thieves. The criminal investigation opened on day 13. By day 15, Jacob had been arrested, posted bail, and found himself unemployable. Meridian's board had leaked the audit findings to industry contacts, and no tech company in the region would touch him. But that wasn't the beautiful part. The beautiful part was Diana. I'd expected her to stand by him. Love conquers all, loyalty to her man, all that fairy tale nonsense I'd once believed in. She lasted 6 days. 6 days of Jacob being broke, unemployed, and facing criminal charges before she texted him, I can't do this anymore, it's too much. I knew this because I'd never cancelled my access to our phone plan. I could read every message, see every call, track every desperate attempt he made to hold on to the one thing he'd destroyed his marriage for. Diana blocked his number on day 17. By day 20, she was dating a venture capitalist she'd met at a networking event. She posted about it on Instagram, subtle at first, then blatant. Photos of expensive dinners, weekend trips to Napa, champagne on private yachts. Everything she'd been getting from Jacob, except from someone who actually had money now. Jacob saw it all. I knew because I watched him through our home security cameras, sitting in the dark, scrolling through her social media, his face a portrait of someone realising they'd traded everything for nothing. He'd lost me for her, and she'd left him the moment he stopped being useful. Poetic justice didn't require my intervention, it just required patience. The third crack, his family. Jacob's parents had always loved me. I was the stable one, the successful one, the daughter-in-law who sent thoughtful birthday gifts and organised holiday dinners. When they called him, demanding to know why I'd disappeared, he apparently told them I'd gone crazy and stolen his company. His mother called Richard to get my number. Richard, bless him, gave it to her. She left a voicemail. Amelia, dear, Jacob told us what happened. His version, anyway. I just want you to know we don't believe him. We've watched him take you for granted for years. Whatever you've done, I'm sure you had your reasons. You were always too good for him. I hope you find happiness. I saved that voicemail. His father sent an email. I raised my son to be better than this. He wasn't. I'm sorry. Even his own family had seen the truth, that Jacob was a parasite who'd attached himself to someone with actual substance, then acted shocked when she finally pulled him off. By week 4, Jacob's life had collapsed completely. No job, no money, no company, no mistress, no support system. criminal charges pending, reputation destroyed, and still, desperately, compulsively, he searched for me. Private investigators found nothing. I'd been too careful, moved too often, used cash and fake names, and stayed in places that didn't require ID, matching the credit card. He tried calling my old friends, but I'd never had many. I'd been too busy building his career while mine stagnated. The few I had told him they hadn't heard from me. They were lying. I'd contacted each of them from an anonymous email, explained that I was safe, that I'd left Jacob deliberately, that they shouldn't tell him anything. They'd all written back some variation of, "Finally." Apparently, my marriage had been transparently terrible to everyone except me. On day 28, Jacob tried to access our house. The locks had been changed. The security system had been updated. He stood on the porch. Our porch, the one I'd picked out, paid for, furnished, trying his key over and over, like maybe the 10th time would be different. I watched through the camera as he finally sat down on the steps and put his head in his hands. Was he crying? I couldn't tell. Didn't particularly care. He had cried in the old timeline too. After I'd swallowed those pills, after the paramedics had taken me away, after he'd realised that his wife was dead and everyone would know it was his fault. Except, in that timeline, the tears had been for himself, for his reputation, for the inconvenience of a dead spouse. These tears, if they were tears, were for the same thing, himself. Not for me. Never for me. He pulled out his phone and made a call. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I watched him talk for 6 minutes. His posture desperate, his free hand gesturing like he was trying to convince someone of something. When he hung up, he looked smaller somehow, diminished. Good. Diana had posted again. Found my person hearts with a photo of her new boyfriend kissing her cheek. The boyfriend wore a Rolex. Jacob's watch had been a mid-range Tag Heuer I'd bought him for his birthday 3 years ago. He'd worn it every day until the day he'd traded me for her. Now she'd traded up again, and he was alone with the consequences. I closed the security app and opened my bank account. Meridian Holdings had processed its quarterly profits. $3.2 million, all of it deposited into my trust account. The company was thriving without Jacob. Turned out his essential leadership had been a myth he'd told himself and anyone who'd listen. The board had promoted Jennifer to COO. She was doing excellent work, had already secured 2 new contracts, and was expanding into markets Jacob had deemed too risky. Everything was better without him. Everyone was better without him, including me, especially me. I ordered room service and ate on the balcony, watching the sunset over a city Jacob didn't know I was in, living a life he couldn't access, existing in a space he could never touch. His panic had become my peace, and tomorrow I would disappear again. New city, new hotel, new temporary existence, until enough time had passed that I could settle somewhere permanently, rebuild myself into something even stronger, become someone Jacob Hartwell wouldn't recognise even if he walked right past me. The revenge wasn't in destroying him. It was in being free while he drowned in the absence of what he'd destroyed. 6 months later, I stood in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, ordering a latte under the name Emma Torres. Emma Torres had dark hair cut in a sharp bob. She wore glasses she didn't need and business casual clothes from stores she'd never shopped at before. She had an apartment lease in her name, a gym membership, a library card, a life assembled from fragments of anonymity. Emma Torres didn't exist before October, but she was very real now. The barista handed me my coffee with a smile. I smiled back, genuine, easy, the smile of someone who wasn't running from anything. Because I wasn't running anymore. I was living. Meridian Holdings was worth $47 million now. The company had gone public in my absence, with Richard acting as my representative and the board believing I was on extended medical leave. The IPO had been wildly successful. Turned out investors loved a female-founded tech company with solid patents and revolutionary software. They loved it even more when the embezzlement scandal broke and I sued Jacob for every cent he'd stolen, plus damages, plus legal fees. He'd settled. Couldn't afford not to. Signed a document admitting fault, agreeing to a payment plan that would take him 15 years to complete, accepting a permanent restraining order that prevented him from coming within 500 feet of me or contacting me in any way. Not that he knew where I was to contact me anyway. I'd heard through Richard that Jacob was working as a regional sales manager for a mid-tier software company in Phoenix. Living in a one-bedroom apartment, driving a used Honda, dating occasionally, but nothing stuck. Apparently, once women Googled his name and found the embezzlement charges, the lawsuit, the restraining order, they disappeared faster than I had. His LinkedIn profile described him as rebuilding after unforeseen challenges. Unforeseen. As if he hadn't created every single one of them. Diana had married the venture capitalist. I'd seen the wedding photos, lavish affair in Napa Valley, exactly the kind of wedding she'd probably fantasized about while sleeping with my husband. Good for her, honestly. She'd gotten what she wanted, and Jacob had gotten what he deserved. I took my coffee to a corner table and opened my laptop. Not for work. I'd hired an exceptional CEO to run Meridian day to day, someone brilliant who didn't care that the mysterious founder never showed up to meetings. I'd built the company. I didn't need to prove anything by running it into the ground with ego. No, I opened my laptop to look at the house I was buying. 3 bedrooms, view of the mountains, garden space for the hobbies I'd never had time for when I was busy being Jacob's shadow. It was perfect, quiet, mine. I was using a shell corporation to purchase it, layers of legal protection ensuring that even if Jacob somehow tracked down Amelia Thorne's assets, he'd never connect them to Emma Torres's life. My phone buzzed. The secure one, the one only Richard and a handful of carefully vetted contacts had access to. Richard, final divorce decree approved. You're officially free. I stared at that message for a long moment. Officially free. I'd been functionally free for 6 months, emotionally free the moment I'd opened my eyes to my rebirth. Financially free the day I'd restructured everything, physically free the morning I'd driven away. But legally free? That had taken time. Jacob had contested the divorce, of course, tried to claim abandonment, emotional distress, all the buzzwords his desperate lawyer had thrown at the wall, hoping something would stick. None of it had. The evidence of his embezzlement, his affair, his systematic erosion of my role in my own company, it was all documented, time-stamped, irrefutable. The judge had granted my petition without hesitation. No alimony for Jacob. He was lucky I hadn't pushed for criminal restitution beyond the civil settlement. No shared assets because there were none. Clean break, complete severing. I typed back, "Thank you for everything. Richard, you did the hard part. I just filed paperwork. What's next for you?" What was next? I looked around the coffee shop, people living their lives, pursuing their dreams, existing in the mundane miracle of ordinary days. I'd spent 8 years in service to someone else's ambitions, believing that's what love required. Sacrifice, invisibility, perpetual support without expectation of reciprocation. I'd been so wrong. Love wasn't supposed to erase you. Partnership wasn't supposed to diminish you. Marriage wasn't supposed to be a slow motion disappearing act where you faded into the background until you ceased to exist. What was next? Everything, I typed. Everything I should have been doing all along. I closed the laptop and pulled out a notebook. Actual paper, actual pen, the kind of analog planning that felt grounding. I'd started it 2 months ago, titled simply Amelia Thorne, version 2.0. Not Emma Torres. Emma was a disguise, a protective shell, a temporary identity I'd needed while the legal proceedings finished, and the danger of Jacob finding me was highest. But Emma could fade away now. I could reclaim my real name, my real life, myself. The list in the notebook had been growing. Buy the mountain house. Learn to paint. Always wanted to. Never had time. Take that cooking class in Italy. Mentor young female entrepreneurs. Start the non-profit for women leaving abusive relationships. Write the book about building Meridian. Names changed, but truth told. Date when ready. No rush, no pressure, no settling. Forgive myself for not seeing the truth sooner. That last one was the hardest. In quiet moments, I still felt echoes of the old pain, the humiliation of being so thoroughly deceived, the grief over wasted years, the anger at my own blindness. I'd been smart enough to build a multi-million-dollar company, but too naive to see that my husband was destroying me. But I was learning to reframe it. I hadn't been stupid. I'd been trusting. There was a difference. Jacob had been the one with the character flaw, not me. My capacity for loyalty, for generosity, for deep commitment, those weren't weaknesses. They were strengths I'd given to someone who didn't deserve them. I wouldn't make that mistake again. But I also wouldn't let his betrayal turn me cynical or bitter or closed off from ever trusting anyone again. That would be letting him win a second time, destroying not just my past but my future too. No, he'd taken enough. I finished my coffee and stepped outside into the Portland drizzle. It was November now, the city grey and green and alive with the kind of beauty you had to look for instead of having it announced. I liked it here. Liked the anonymity of a city where no one knew Amelia Hartwell or cared about Silicon Valley drama or asked questions about why a woman in her 30s was starting over from scratch. Because I wasn't starting from scratch. I was starting from wisdom. That night, I had dinner with Sophia, a friend I'd made at a book club, someone who knew me only as Emma, who liked me for my opinions on literature and my laugh and my company, not for my money or connections or usefulness. It was the first real friendship I'd had in years, maybe ever. "You seem happy," Sophia said over pasta, different than when we first met. I'd been raw then, still processing, still looking over my shoulder for threats that no longer existed. "I am happy," I said and meant it. "Good, you deserve it." She raised her wine glass. "To fresh starts." "To fresh starts," I echoed. We clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Hope. Not hope that someone would save me or complete me or give my life meaning. Hope that I could do all that myself. And I was. The email arrived 3 weeks later. I almost deleted it. The address was unfamiliar, the subject line blank. But something made me open it. "Amelia, I know I have no right to contact you. I know there's a restraining order. I'm not trying to violate it. Richard assured me this email wouldn't legally count as contact if you chose not to respond. I just needed to tell you I understand now. What I lost, what I destroyed. Diana left me before the arrest. My family barely speaks to me. I'm working a job I hate, living in a city where I know no one, and every day I wake up and realize that the best thing that ever happened to me is gone, because I was too stupid to see it while I had it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking you to come back. I know both are impossible. I just wanted you to know that you won, completely, not just financially or legally, but in every way that matters. You became someone who didn't need me, and I became someone who never stopped regretting losing you. I hope you're happy wherever you are. You deserve happiness. You always did. I'm sorry. Jacob, I read it twice. Then I deleted it. Not out of anger. Anger would have meant he still had power over me. Not out of pain that had transformed into something else months ago, something harder and brighter and mine. And I deleted it because his apology, his regret, his suffering, none of it mattered anymore. He could be sorry for the rest of his life and it wouldn't change the past. He could suffer forever and it wouldn't give me back the years I'd lost. He could understand what he'd destroyed, and it wouldn't rebuild what he'd broken. Because I'd already rebuilt it myself, better, stronger, without him. His pain wasn't my victory. My freedom was. I closed the laptop and looked out the window of my new house. The mountain house, the one with the garden, and the view and the space to breathe. I'd moved in last week. Unpacked slowly, deliberately, choosing where each piece of my life would go without consulting anyone or compromising or considering anyone else's preferences. Every room was mine, every decision was mine, every moment of every day was mine. That was the revenge Jacob couldn't comprehend. That I didn't need his destruction to be whole, I just needed him to be absent. And he was, completely, a ghost haunting his own life while I lived mine in vivid, brilliant colour. My phone rang. The new phone, the one attached to my real name, now that the divorce was final and the danger had passed. Miss Thorne, this is Dr. Patricia Rodriguez from Seattle Women's Entrepreneurship Network. We received your proposal for the mentorship program. We'd love to discuss partnership opportunities. That's wonderful, I said, pulling out my calendar. When works for you? We scheduled a meeting. I hung up and made a note. First step toward the nonprofit. Help other women disappear before they need to die first. Because that's what my death had given me, perspective. A chance to see my life from the outside, to understand that the love I'd believed in had been a beautiful lie, to recognise that staying would have killed me eventually, literally or figuratively. Not every woman got that chance. Not every woman had the resources or the warning or the ability to vanish, but I could help them. I could use my money, my experience, my hard-won knowledge to create exit strategies for women who needed them. I could turn my trauma into someone else's salvation. That felt like purpose, real purpose, not the borrowed purpose of supporting someone else's dreams, but the kind of purpose that came from surviving and deciding the survival meant something. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. I stood on my deck with a glass of wine. Good wine, expensive wine I'd bought because I wanted it, not because it impressed anyone, and watched the day end. Tomorrow I'd wake up alone, by choice, in my house, in my life, in my future, and somewhere Jacob would wake up alone too, by consequence, in the ruins of what he'd destroyed. We'd both disappeared, in a way, but only one of us had been reborn. I raised my glass to the sunset, to the mountains, to the life I'd clawed back from the edge of oblivion. To Amelia Thorne, I said aloud to no one and everyone, the woman who died and decided death was optional. The wine tasted like victory. The silence felt like peace, and tomorrow I would continue becoming the woman I should have been all along. Whole, powerful, free. Not because a man had finally appreciated me, but because I'd finally appreciated myself. That was the real rebirth. That was the real revenge. Not his pain, my peace. Not his regret, my renaissance. Not his search, my freedom to never be found again. I drained the glass and went inside, closing the door on the past and walking toward a future where the only person who could erase me was me. And this time, I chose to exist. Loudly, completely, unapologetically, forever.